Do you have a view
Which
of
God?
this?
I haven't read the book. Which God?
The God of
any,
any kind of...
Either a creating one or a supervising one, and certainly an intervening one. I mean, I think that's fairly exhaustive. My view had always been that since we have to live with uncertainty, only those who are certain leave the room before the discussion can become adult. Victor Stenger seems to think now we've got to the stage where we can say with reasonable confidence it's disproved, not as not vindicated or better explanation proposed. But I just thought it'd be an interesting proposition because it matters a lot to me that our opinions are congruent with uncertainty.
Right. Well, I think the weak
and
link...
in other words, with doubt.
Yeah, I was a big fan of his book and actually blurbed it, but I think the weakest link is this foundational claim on the texts, this idea that we know that the Bible is the perfect word of an omniscient deity, because that is an especially weak claim, and it really is the claim. It's really the gold in their epistemological gold standard. I mean, it all rests on that. That if the Bible is not a magic book, Christianity, in this case, evaporates. If the Quran is not a magic book, Islam evaporates. And when you look at the books and ask yourself, is there the slightest shred of evidence that this is the product of omniscience? Is there a single sentence in here that could not have been uttered by a person for whom a wheelbarrow would have been, emergent technology? You have to say no. I mean, there's not. If the Bible had an account of DNA and electricity and other things that would astonish us, then okay, our jaws drop suitably, and we have to have a sensible conversation about the source of this knowledge.
Dinesh D'Souza makes this claim in his new book. He's going to be, by the way, one of the much more literate and well-read and educated of our antagonists. I'm going to be debating soon. He says that in Genesis, which people used to mock, they said, "Let there be light," and then only a few staves later you get the sun and the moon and the stars.
Right.
How could that be? Well, it's actually, according to the Big Bang, that would be right.
Yeah, but that's
the bang precedes the galaxies.
Yeah.
I mean, believe me, it's pathetic too. But
right. Well, I try to demonstrate this cast of mind in, I think, a very long endnote in the End of Faith, where I say any text can be read. Well, with the eyes of faith, you can make magical impressions out of any text. So I literally walked into a bookstore, the cookbook aisle of a bookstore, randomly opened a cookbook, found a recipe for wok, I think it was wok seared shrimp with Ogo relish or something, and then came up with a mystical interpretation of the recipe. And you can do it. I mean, you can connect the dots with any crazy text.
Well, Michael
Shermer
did it with the Bible code.
Right, I haven't seen that.
The hidden messages in the Bible.
Yeah.
Very, very good. You can write yesterday's headlines from it anytime you like. Yeah.
I have a question for the three of you. Is there any argument for faith, any challenge to your atheism that has given you pause, that has sent you back on your heels, where you felt you didn't have a ready answer, etc.?
I actually can't think of any.
I mean, I think the closest is the idea that the fundamental constants of the universe are too good to be true, and that does seem to me to need some kind of explanation if it's true. I mean, Victor Stenger doesn't think it is true, but many physicists do. I don't think, I mean, it certainly doesn't in any way suggest to me a creative intelligence, because you're still left with the problem of explaining where that came from.
Right.
And a creative intelligence who's sufficiently creative and intelligent enough to fine-tune the constants of the universe to give rise to us has got to be a lot more fine-tuned himself than...
Why create all the other planets in our solar system dead?
Well, that's a separate question.
Yeah, say, if it was that good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
Bishop Montefiore was very good at this, was a former friend of mine, and say that you have to marvel at the conditions of life and the knife edge on which they are. So it is a knife edge, yes. Our planet is, a lot of it too hot or too cold.
Right.
Sort of climate. The other planets
parasites,
are completely too hot or too cold to support life. That's just one solar system, the only one we know about where there is life. Not much of a designer. And of course you can't get out of the infinite regress. But I've not come across a single persuasive argument of that kind. But I wouldn't have expected to, because as I realized when I thought one evening, they never come up with anything new. Well, why would they? Their arguments are very old by definition. And they were all evolved when we knew very, very little about the natural order. The only argument that I find at all attractive, and this is for faith, you asked, as well as for theism, is what I suppose I'd call the apotropaic. When people say all the praise belongs to God for this, he's to be thanked for all this. That is actually a form of modesty. It's a superstitious one. That's why I say apotropaic. But it's avoiding hubris. It's also for that reason, obviously pre-monotheistic. But religion does or can help people to avoid hubris, I think, morally and intellectually, and that might be a.
But that's not an argument that it's true.
Oh, for heaven's sake! No, there are and cannot be any such arguments. I think.
Well, maybe I should broaden this question.
No, wait a minute. I think.
But before you answer, Dan,
I could give you several discoveries which would shake my faith right to the ground.
But let me just broaden the question.
Yeah.
Not only
rabbits in the Precambrian.
No.
Not only an argument for the plausibility of religious belief, but an argument that suggests that what we're up to, criticizing faith, is a bad thing.
Oh, that's much easier.
We shouldn't be doing. So let's exclude
that.
that.
By all means.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be doing what we're doing.
That's much easier.
Okay.
It's easier to think of a good reason.
I mean, somebody could come up with an argument that says that the world is a better place and everybody believes a falsehood.
Is there any context, though, in your work or in dialogue with your critics where you feel that argument has given you pause?
Oh, yes. Not so much in Breaking the Spell, but when I was working on my book on free will, Freedom Evolves, I kept running into critics who were basically expressing something very close to a religious view, namely, look, free will is such an important idea. If we gave up the idea of free will, people would lose a sense of responsibility and we would have chaos. And you really don't want to look too closely. Just avert your eyes. Do not look too closely at this issue of free will and determinism. And I thought about that explicitly in the environmental impact category. Okay, could I imagine that my irrepressible curiosity could lead me to articulate something, true or false, which would have such devastating effects on the world that I should just shut up and change the subject? Right. And I think that's a good question that we all should ask.
Yeah, good.
Absolutely. And I spent a lot of time thinking hard about that, and I wouldn't have published either of those two books if I hadn't come to the conclusion that it was not only, as it were, environmentally safe to proceed this way, but obligatory. But I think you should ask that question. I do.
Right.
Before publishing a book, but not before deciding for yourself, do I think that this is true or not? One should never do what some politically motivated, often, critics do, which is to say, this is so politically obnoxious that it cannot be true.
Oh, yeah.
And which is a different
thing entirely. No.
No, it would be like discovering that you thought that the bell curve on white and black intelligence was a correct interpretation of IQ.
Yes, and you could well suppress
now I've looked at all this stuff again, I'm absolutely, you could say, now what am I going to do? Fortunately, these questions don't in fact present themselves in that way.
I'll tell you one place where it's presented itself to me. I think it was an op-ed in the LA Times, I could be mistaken, but someone argued that the reason why the Muslim population in the U.S. is not radicalized the way it is in Western Europe is largely the result of the fact that we honor faith so much in our discourse that they have not become, the community has not become as insular and as grievance-ridden as in Western Europe. Now, I don't know if this is true, but if it were true, that gave me a moment's pause.
That would be of interest. James Wolfenson, later the World Bank, recently the negotiator on Gaza, says that he firmly believes that he had tremendous influence for good with the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas because he was an Orthodox Jew. If so, I think it would be disgusting, I have to say. and he shouldn't have had the job in the first place. Because we know one absolute thing for certain about that conflict, which is that it's been made infinitely worse by the monarchy. If it were only a national and territorial dispute, it would have been solved by now. So, but his self-satisfaction in saying so, even if it were true, would turn me even more against him.